"You're too fat to be anyone's wife," her father screamed. "But the mountain man said, 'She's perfect for mine.' You're too fat to be anyone's wife." The words cracked through the small cottage like a whip. Outside, snow fell softly over Willowbrook, but inside, fury burned hotter than the hearth. Cordelia Delia Whitfield, 23, stood trembling in the middle of her father's parlor. Her cheeks were flushed, her curls damp with tears. She was a woman of soft curves and gentleness, yet to her father that gentleness had become a curse. "No man will ever want you," Harrison Whitfield shouted, his face red with drink. "You're a burden, girl. If no one marries you by month's end, you'll leave this house for good." Delia's voice cracked. "Papa, please." But he was already turning away, muttering about wasted food, wasted years, wasted chances. Her mother sat silent in the corner, eyes downcast, too afraid to speak. Then a knock. 3 heavy, deliberate knocks that shook the door in its frame. When Harrison opened it, a gust of snow swept in, and behind it a shadow that filled the doorway. A man built like the mountain itself, broad-shouldered, weather-tanned, gray eyes like steel beneath dark hair. "My name's Matthias Blackwood," he said in a voice that rumbled low and calm. "They call me Stone. I heard you have a daughter." Harrison blinked, startled. "I do." "I came to ask for her hand," Stone said simply. Silence. The fire popped. The wind howled. Delia's breath caught. You want to marry her?" her father stammered. Stone's eyes found Delia's, steady, unwavering. "Yes," he said, "she's perfect for me." And in that single moment, between the disbelief of a cruel father and the quiet strength of a stranger, Delia's life began to change forever. The room fell utterly silent. Only the faint hiss of snow against the windows broke the stillness. Cordelia Delia Whitfield could hardly breathe. The stranger standing in her doorway didn't seem real. He was too large, too certain, too calm amid the chaos her father had created. Her father, Harrison Whitfield, blinked rapidly, still trying to comprehend what he'd just heard. You want to marry my daughter?" "I do," the man replied. "My name's Matthias Blackwood, though most call me Stone. I live up on Ironwood Peak. I need a wife. I heard about Miss Whitfield and came to ask for her hand." Harrison barked out a harsh laugh. "You can't be serious. Well, look at her." Stone's gray eyes hardened. "I am looking." His tone cut like a blade. "And what I see is a woman worth more than the entire town of Willowbrook put together." Delia gasped softly. No one had ever defended her before. Her father faltered. "But she's not exactly the marrying type. Clumsy, shy, eats too much." Stone took a slow step forward, his voice steady and low. "She's strong, gentle, kind. I've watched her give bread to hungry children and comfort old Mrs. Carmody when no one else would. I've seen the way she smiles at people who don't deserve it." He looked directly at Delia. "You have a good heart. That's rarer than beauty, and more lasting." Delia's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever seen her that way, not even her own family. Her father's voice cracked with greed. "If you really mean this, Blackwood, you'll take her off my hands immediately. No dowry." Stone turned to face him, jaw tight. "I'm not buying a wife, Mr. Whitfield. I'm asking for one. And whether she says yes or no, that's her choice, not yours." Harrison bristled, unused to being challenged in his own home. "You mean to tell me she can refuse you?" "I'd prefer it if she didn't," Stone said quietly, "but I'll walk away before I force her." He knelt down then, this towering, fearsome man lowering himself before Delia like a knight in front of a queen. "Miss Cordelia Whitfield," he said softly, "I can't promise riches or an easy life. I can only promise to treat you with respect, to keep you warm, to make sure you never go hungry again. Will you marry me?" Delia stared at him, trembling. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he replied. "Enough to see that you've been told lies about yourself for too long." Her father snorted. "Girl, say yes already. You'll never get another chance like this." Stone's gaze snapped toward him, voice suddenly cold. "This isn't about chances. It's about worth. And she's worth more than you ever gave her credit for." He turned back to Delia, his hand extended. "If you want to say no, I'll understand. But if you want a life where no one mocks you again, come with me." The room spun. Delia's heart thundered. For years she'd lived under her father's roof, drowning in shame, believing every cruel word. And now, here was a man who saw her, really saw her, and still chose her. With tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "Yes, I'll marry you." Stone smiled for the first time, a small, quiet smile that reached his storm-gray eyes. Then it settled. He stood and looked at her father. "You don't need to worry about her anymore. I'll take care of her now." And in that moment, beneath the crackling fire and the falling snow, Delia realized, for the first time in her life, she wasn't being given away. She was being chosen. The next morning dawned gray and cold, the world outside blanketed in snow so thick it muffled every sound. Cordelia Delia Whitfield stood at the gate of her father's home, bundled in a cloak that belonged to her late mother. Her few belongings, one dress, a Bible, and a hair ribbon, were packed neatly into a small leather bag. Behind her, the house was silent. Her father hadn't come down to see her off. Perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of indifference. Either way, it didn't matter now. Standing beside the wagon was Matthias Stone Blackwood, a man carved from wind and wilderness. His dark hair was damp from the snow, his expression unreadable as he tightened the straps on the horses. "You ready?" he asked quietly. Delia nodded, though her heart pounded so hard it felt like the world could hear it. "I think so." He helped her climb into the wagon, his gloved hand enveloping hers, warm, steady, protective. "Hold on," he murmured, and with a crack of the reins, the horses started forward. As they rolled out of Willowbrook, Delia glanced back one last time. The cottage was already fading into the mist, the life she'd known swallowed by the white. She turned back toward the mountains, where the road wound upward through fir and pine. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rhythm of hooves on snow was steady, almost peaceful. "You're quiet," Stone said finally. Delia hesitated. "I just don't understand why." "Why what?" "Why you wanted me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. He kept his eyes on the road. "You think kindness needs a reason? I'm not what people would call desirable." He glanced at her then, his expression sharp. "I don't care what people call you. They've been wrong before." Delia blinked, surprised by the firmness in his tone. "You don't even know me." "I've seen you," he said, "in the market, helping Mrs. Green carry her groceries when no one else would. Reading stories to the Miller children outside the bakery. You're gentle when the world isn't. That's what I wanted." Delia looked away, tears welling. No one had ever noticed those things before. They stopped by a frozen creek to rest the horses. Stone set up a small fire, moving with quiet efficiency. Delia sat near the flames, her hands trembling as she warmed them. He passed her a tin cup filled with hot coffee. "Drink. It'll help." "Thank you," she murmured. After a pause, she added softly, "You're not what I expected either." He arched a brow. "What did you expect?" "A cruel man. Someone like my father." Stone's jaw clenched. "I've known cruel men. I decided a long time ago I'd never be one." She studied him for a long moment, the quiet way he carried himself, the small scar on his cheek, the steady calm in his voice. He wasn't handsome in the way town men were, but there was something stronger, something unshakable in him. When they started moving again, the climb grew steeper. Pines thickened around them, their branches heavy with snow. By the time they reached the first ridge, the sun was dipping low behind the peaks. Stone pulled the horses to a stop and nodded ahead. "That's Ironwood Peak." Delia followed his gaze. The mountain rose like a cathedral, its summit wrapped in mist. At its base, nestled among the trees, was a small cabin glowing faintly with firelight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He glanced at her, almost shy. "It's home. Ours now." Something inside her broke and healed all at once. After years of being told she was a burden, she was hearing the word ours, and it felt like grace. As they approached the cabin, snow began to fall again, light and steady. Delia watched the flakes catch in his dark hair and thought, maybe this is what safety looks like. And though she didn't yet know what kind of life waited for her on that mountain, she knew one thing for certain. She would never be unwanted again. Snow still whispered outside when Delia Whitfield, now Mrs. Blackwood, crossed the threshold of her new home. The cabin on Ironwood Peak was nothing like the cold rooms of Willowbrook. It breathed warmth. The scent of pine sap and wood smoke clung to the air, and the golden light from the hearth made the rough-hewn walls glow. Stone placed her bag gently near the fireplace. "It's not much," he said quietly, "but it keeps the wind out, and the roof holds through the storms." Delia turned in a slow circle, eyes wide. The cabin had a large wooden table, shelves lined with jars of herbs and flour, and a narrow bed tucked into the far corner, its quilt hand-stitched. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It feels alive." He gave a small, shy smile. "Built it with my own hands. Every beam." The words made her throat tighten. In this man's world of stone and snow, everything he touched seemed to endure. "Sit by the fire," he said, motioning toward a chair. "You're half frozen." When she obeyed, Stone poured her a cup of stew from a pot simmering over the flames. She tasted it carefully. It was rich, smoky, and warm. "It's wonderful," she murmured. "I'm better at building than cooking," he said. "But I try." She smiled. "You do more than try." For a while they ate in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. Delia caught him glancing at her sometimes, as though he couldn't quite believe she was there. When she'd finished, she rose to wash the bowl, but he stopped her. "Leave it. You've had a long journey." "I should help," she insisted. "You will," he said softly. "Tomorrow." His tone carried no command, only gentleness, a sound so foreign to her ears that it made her chest ache. That night, when she prepared to sleep, she hesitated near the bed. "Where will you—" "I'll take the chair," Stone replied immediately, nodding toward the fireside. "But that can't be comfortable." "It's fine," he said. "I don't take what isn't offered, Delia." Her breath caught. "You don't have to prove you're kind." He looked at her then, the shadows softening around his face. It's not about proving, it's about respect. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the girl who had never known gentleness, and the man who had lived too long without warmth. "Good night, Stone," she whispered. "Good night, Delia." The days began to fall into rhythm. Stone rose early, cutting logs and checking traps. Delia cooked, swept, mended, and learned where he kept everything, how he stored salt to keep it dry, which herbs soothed a sore throat, how to tell when the firewood was seasoned. At first, she worried he would tire of her clumsiness, but when she burned bread or spilled water, Stone only smiled faintly and said, "Now you know for next time." He didn't laugh at her mistakes. He built patience around them. One afternoon, as she kneaded dough, he came in from chopping wood, snow-dusting his shoulders. "Let me show you something," he said, motioning for her to follow. Outside, behind the cabin, stood a small pen made of rough timber. Inside was a young calf, brown-eyed and shy. "Found her in the woods last winter," he explained. "She'd have died if I hadn't brought her in. I thought she might keep you company." Delia reached out, gently stroking the calf's neck. "You rescued her?" Stone shrugged, a hint of color rising to his cheeks. "I don't like seeing things suffer." The words were simple, but they struck deep, because in saving that calf, he had also saved her. That evening, while they ate, she asked quietly, "Do you ever miss living in town?" He shook his head. "Town's full of noise. Up here, the mountain listens." "And now, you'll have to listen to me," she teased softly. Stone smiled, a real smile this time. "That's a sound I don't mind." She blushed, looking down at her stew. Weeks passed. The snow melted into rivers that glittered through the pines. Delia found herself laughing again, really laughing, when Stone told dry, unexpected jokes, or when the calf nudged at her apron for bread. One evening, as the sunset turned the world copper, she stood by the doorway watching him fix the fence. He worked with slow, sure movements, sleeves rolled to the elbow, strength visible in every line of him. When he looked up and caught her staring, she flushed. "What?" he asked with a grin that tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Nothing," she stammered. "Just thank you for all of this." He wiped his hands on a rag. "You don't owe me thanks." "I do," she said softly. "You gave me a home when I had none. You made me feel—" She hesitated, voice trembling. "Seen." He stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Then I'm the lucky one," he said quietly, "because I get to see you every day." For a long heartbeat, the air between them held its breath. And as the first stars appeared over Ironwood Peak, Delia realized something she had never dared believe, that love didn't always begin with passion or beauty. Sometimes it began with kindness. Summer arrived on Ironwood Peak with the smell of pine and rain. The snow had melted into glistening streams, and life on the mountain had taken on a steady, tender rhythm. Cordelia Delia Blackwood had grown used to the sound of the wind brushing the cabin roof, the call of birds in the morning, and the deep, quiet peace that lived in her husband's voice when he said her name. But sometimes, when the wind howled too long, Matthias Stone Blackwood grew distant. He would sit on the porch for hours, staring down toward the valley as though the world below might rise up to claim him. Delia noticed it first on a warm evening in June. The fire was low, and Stone hadn't touched his supper. His eyes were far away. "You're thinking about something," she said gently. He didn't look up. Someone. She waited. He rarely spoke about his past, and she'd never pushed. Finally, his voice came low, rough. "My brother, Elias." Delia set down her fork. "You never told me you had a brother." "I don't," Stone said flatly. "Not anymore." The silence stretched. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the peaks. After a long pause, he went on. "We built this cabin together, Elias and I. We were supposed to run a lumber line down into the valley. He handled the business, I handled the work. But he borrowed money from men he shouldn't have. Railroad men, gamblers. When they came to collect, I tried to stop them. There was a fight. A gun went off." Delia's chest tightened. "Stone, he didn't make it," Stone said quietly, "and they blame me. Said I killed him in a dispute over money. That's why I live up here. I didn't run from guilt. I ran from the law." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "You didn't kill him." His eyes lifted to hers, haunted, tired. "Doesn't matter. The town thinks I did. They needed a villain, and I was built for the part." Delia shook her head, tears glimmering. "They don't know you." He gave a sad smile. "They don't want to." Days passed, and though he said no more about it, she could feel the weight pressing on him. Then one afternoon, as she was hanging laundry outside, she heard the sound of hooves. When she turned, her heart sank. 2 men rode up the trail, one in a black coat, one with a tin star pinned to his vest. The sheriff. "Mrs. Blackwood," the man called out, "we're looking for your husband." Delia swallowed hard. "He's not here." "That's funny," the sheriff said, glancing at the smoke rising from the chimney. "Because it looks like someone's home." Before she could speak, the door opened. Stone stepped out, rifle in hand, his face unreadable. "Morning, Sheriff," he said evenly. "What brings you this high up?" The man dismounted slowly. "Word's come down from Willowbrook. The Whitfield family's been talking. Your wife's father claims you stole her away." Delia's stomach dropped. "She came of her own will," Stone said coldly. "Maybe. But there's another matter," the sheriff continued, reaching into his coat. "The railroad company's reopening the investigation into your brother's death. They think you might have had a reason to silence him." Delia stepped forward, voice trembling. "That's a lie!" The sheriff glanced at her, pity flickering in his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job, but they're coming for you both. Papers, warrants, won't be long now." He tipped his hat and turned his horse. "Best prepare yourselves." When the men disappeared down the trail, the silence left behind was deafening. Delia turned to Stone. "What will we do?" His jaw tightened. "We'll stand our ground." "But if they come here—" "They will," he interrupted softly. "Men like that always do. But I won't let them take you." She stepped closer, resting a trembling hand against his chest. "You don't have to protect me alone anymore, Stone. Whatever comes, we face it together." He looked down at her then, the storm in his eyes meeting the calm in hers. "I used to believe I'd already lost everything," he said, "but now I know what I'd fight to the end to keep." And in that quiet vow, sealed by the rising wind, the mountains seemed to listen and wait for the reckoning to come. The storm rolled in before dawn. Clouds clawed at the peaks, lightning flashed behind them, and the wind screamed down through the trees like a warning. Delia Blackwood woke to the sound of boots on the porch. Steady, deliberate, too many to count. She rose quickly, heart pounding, and looked out through the frost-fogged window. Lanterns, rifles, men. Matthias, Stone. Blackwood was already by the door, loading his rifle with calm, measured hands. "They came faster than I thought," he said quietly. Delia's voice shook. "The sheriff?" "And your father," he answered without turning. Her breath caught. "Papa?" Stone's jaw flexed. "He brought them. I saw his wagon." Outside, a rough voice shouted, "Blackwood, step out and face the law like a man." Stone checked the chamber, then looked at her. "Stay back, Delia." "No," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I won't hide while you fight for me." He hesitated, the ghost of a smile flickering across his face. "Then we face them together." He swung the door open. Wind and sleet burst inside, stinging their faces. On the slope below stood the sheriff, 6 deputies, and Harrison Whitfield, his face twisted with triumph and fear. "You've got nowhere left to run," the sheriff called. "Come quietly, Blackwood. The railroad's claiming this mountain, and the lady's going home where she belongs." Delia stepped forward before Stone could stop her. Her voice rang across the ridge. "This is my home. He didn't steal me. I chose him. You all stood by while my father called me worthless. He's the only one who ever saw me as more." The men shifted uneasily, some lowering their guns. Harrison's voice cracked through the wind. "You're my daughter. You'll do as I say." "No," Delia said softly but firmly. "You lost the right to call me daughter the day you tried to sell me off like property." The sheriff raised his rifle. "Enough talk." But before he could aim, Stone's voice boomed like thunder. "You fire that gun, and you'll have to kill me first." He stepped out into the open, tall and unflinching. The wind tore at his coat, snow swirling around him like smoke. "Look at yourselves," he growled. 6 men with guns, come to steal a home from one woman and a man who's done you no harm. If this is the law, it's not worth following." The sheriff hesitated. Then, one by one, his men lowered their weapons. Harrison stared at his daughter, his fury collapsing into something small and broken. "You'd choose him over your own blood?" Delia met his gaze. "Yes, because blood doesn't make a family, love does." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the sheriff sighed, holstering his weapon. "Let it go, Harrison. She's made her choice." One by one, the men turned their horses and rode back down the trail. Harrison lingered last, eyes glistening with something almost like regret, before following them into the mist. Stone lowered his rifle slowly. "It's over," he murmured. Delia's knees nearly gave out, but he caught her, pulling her close. "You're safe," he whispered against her hair. "No," she breathed. "We're safe." And as the storm broke above them, the first sunlight pierced the clouds, falling across the cabin that love had built and courage had saved. By the time the last echoes of hoofbeats faded into the valley, the mountain was quiet again. The storm had spent itself, leaving behind a silver hush over Ironwood Peak. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. Cordelia Delia Blackwood sat wrapped in a quilt by the window, watching snow melt from the eaves. Outside, Matthias Stone Blackwood was mending the fence the wind had torn down, his broad frame moving slowly in the soft light of dawn. When he came back in, brushing snow from his hair, she rose to meet him. "It's really over, isn't it?" He nodded, setting aside his gloves. "The sheriff won't return. And your father? He's not a man who climbs mountains twice." Delia exhaled, her shoulders finally loosening. "I thought I'd never stop being afraid." Stone reached for her hand. "Fear doesn't vanish. You just stop letting it own you." She smiled faintly, her eyes shining. "You taught me that." He shook his head. "You taught yourself. I only stood close enough to see it happen." For a while they stood in the quiet glow of the fire. Outside, the snow dripped from the roof in steady rhythm, like the ticking of a clock marking a new beginning. Delia rested her head against his chest. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't knocked on that door?" "Every day," he murmured, "and every day I thank God that I did." He kissed the top of her head. "You changed this mountain, Delia. You made it a home." She looked up at him, her voice soft but certain. "No, Stone. You showed me what love really looks like, strong, patient, and true." Outside, the first green shoots broke through the snow. Ironwood Peak had survived its winter, and so had they. Some stories remind us that love doesn't arrive in perfection. It's born from the broken, the unwanted, the overlooked. Delia was told she wasn't worthy of love, yet the mountain proved otherwise. If this story reached your heart tonight, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Because whether you're by the ocean, in a city, or under quiet mountain skies, we all share the same hope: to be seen, chosen, and loved for who we truly are. And if you still believe that real love can find you even after the storm, stay a while. The next story is waiting for you.